Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If we're watching on YouTube, well, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our second hour today is going to be about LiDAR. We're going to just a quick overview. We're going to talk about LiDAR relatively often, and this is really just going to be to start the conversation and explain a couple things and answer some questions, get everyone started, and then we'll keep on digging deeper into it. So stay tuned for that. And now let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Sorry. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one this morning.
We have different readers, and I have to find, I have to find the little square. I find the square. Usually I find it before I get on, but I had some tech issues. Anyway, so there we go. Go ahead, take it away, Bill.
I'm here, and here we go. Felipe Valles, who's here in the panel today from Prague in the Czech Republic, says, Felipe received his Insta360 Link today. Is there an opportunity to show the comparison between the GH5 and the webcam?
Felipe?
Well, here it is, right? I was thinking that would be interesting to show. But there is nothing, I think, like Alex said the other day, it's not going to get much better than the GH5, right? So it's all about expectations and what we want to see. But the thing is, I'm already on it.
Oh.
So this is my framing, the same that I would normally use with the GH5.
Now, are you doing a softened background, or are you?
I'm using the one from the M1, so I'm gonna switch it off right now. This is how the camera would be just by itself.
Right.
It's actually not too bad.
I think the image quality is really good.
Yeah, and I have the same setup that I normally have, right? So I have the same lights, same background, put the camera in the same place on the teleprompter, and then I think I prefer with the portrait mode from macOS, but that's it. I have been here sitting this whole time and no one said anything.
you said that when you say you're using the macOS portrait mode, where is that coming from?
That one that comes from the Control Center. If you go to Control Center, and this is only on Apple Silicon Macs, right? So then there's video effects on the top left, and there it's going to show all the applications that are using the camera at the moment. So I have the Insta360 Link controller and the zoom, and you can switch on and off them independently.
Right.
So yeah, right now I have the zoom one. And of course, if I keep on moving my hands around, the thing can
zoom
get
control.
confused.
You mean that's zoom control or the zoom background?
This is from macOS. I have not tried the zoom one yet. I could. So switching off the one from macOS and the one from background effects, blur. This one is the one from Zoom.
Which is a little too much. So interesting. What I would say is that overall, the edges look a little better with the Zoom one than the macOS. The macOS softens the edges a little bit more,
right.
But the background blur is too much. And now I'm starting to wonder whether that's a feature request for Zoom is to, what if we could adjust that? Have 3 or 4 different versions of it.
Excellent if we could adjust that.
Because the macOS one looks very and this is the size. This is what he's using. I got it yesterday as well. So this is this little guy here, and I tested it yesterday. I don't have it in my system right now. It does, when it's on, get hot. Like I left it on for a whole day and it was hot to touch, so it will warm up a bit. But this gives you a sense of what the size is of what Felipe is using. I think that my overall opinion right now is that it's one of the best webcams. It's probably for home use, or if I was going to use it myself, it's probably the thing that I'm probably going to end up using. What I did is I put it on this arm. This is one of those little Gato wave arms. I just stuck it on the arm. And now I can use it I don't have it set up now, but I can have it as an overhead camera, just swing it in and have it as an overhead camera. So that's kind of the place that I'm planning to use it, because I already have some other cameras. But I will say that, like, for the cooking stuff, I think it would be amazing. Yeah. And it's following really, really well. I'd love for it to be able to, the same thing with the center cam. It does better than Apple's center stage, in my opinion. What is the L? Oh, there we go. Oh, zoom out.
That's the zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And so then you're just using hand gestures. It knows what those hand gestures look like.
Right. And you can set up presets. So for example, I have a medium
Lots of them.
preset here. Yeah. And I have my office hours preset.
Right. Yeah.
What's the connection? Is it USB-C or?
USB-C.
USB-C. Yeah.
USB-C.
Yeah. And it is, image quality is incredible. The controls are the best controls I've seen on a web camera. I mean, their interface is really cool. At least for me, the USB, I mean, the switching from setting to setting took a couple seconds. There's a little bit of latency, jumping from, I'm used to PTZ cameras, like high-end PTZ cameras. You hit them and they just go where they need to go. It felt like for mine, I need to think for a second and then it does it. But it has curves, exposure curves built into it. It has, just a ton of control where it's actually telling you this is the ISO that I'm using and this is the color balance that I'm using. And so there's a lot more detail to it. I am painfully tempted to buy 2 more so I have I got to do a 3 camera shoot with a little, I got to do an example where I have a little laptop, like a little laptop in my, like in a satchel or something. And then I have 3 of these cameras and I just pull it out and I'm going to do a show, because you could really do a reasonably good show with these. And if I was a teacher, having one as a main camera and then one as like an overhead, and it has an overhead mode, but if I wanted to switch back and forth in something like Mimo Live or vMix or OBS, I would want to have, be able to have a couple of these cameras. And I think, wow, I have to say, Paul Wallace was really excited about these, and he's like, "Is this going to be the most exciting unboxing? Is this going to be a game changer?" And he was really, really excited. I was kind of poo-pooing Paul. I was wrong. It's actually it is a game changer. It's
HDMI out. It'd be really a game changer.
Oh man, yeah, an HDMI out on this camera would be quite a thing. I do think that, one of the things that could be really cool is like if you think about Apple Keynote and being able to integrate this with that, and having a couple of these cameras all available to Apple Keynote. I think it's the most exciting webcam I've seen in a long time. It really. I was, I buy a lot of these. I have almost all the ones that say 4K on them. And this is the first one that I was like, okay, this is, now here's the worst part. Still won't send it out with our kits. And the reason is it's too delicate, too small. This is too small. I'll have people breaking it. I was like excited about it, but I was like, oh, I don't think I could, unless I'm going to send someone out to set it up, I'm just afraid that a civilian user would break it. So it's a little bit more delicate. It's not something you're going to throw in your backpack. And I do feel like someone's going to build a little case for it. Someone's got to, I'm thinking about printing one, but someone's got to put like a little case that you can put it in because it's small and it looks like you could break it relatively. Maybe it's super durable and I'm just being careful, but there's a lot of little moving parts there. But as a home rig, as building a little lab that you're going to show stuff in, and I do think that you could do a really solid 3 camera shoot with 3 of these. Like something that, and I'm trying not to spend the money, but we'll see. I'd like to spend the money on 2 more of these just to prove the model, but we'll see. We'll see. It's a really slick one. So you're happy with it, Felipe?
Oh yeah, 100%. And now my GH5 is free to be used properly and not just as a webcam.
Right.
And the webcam, look at this, it's really sharp. And I don't know, I have nothing against it at the moment.
Yeah, it's really good. And especially when you turn it down, it does look like it's like a native is like ISO 200 or so. It might be 400. It doesn't really get any better when you go below those numbers. The grain stays pretty much the same, as you move through it. But really great. I would love to see them give us an interface that, and I guess there is some APIs. I think people are kicking that around and whether they're going to be tied in or not. But it would be great to be able to tie this into a system.
Now, one thing that would be interesting to have it is because it has the light, and for example, mine is right behind the teleprompter, is if you could tap into that light, and this was an idea from Jonas Daltel, and make it a tele light. So that would be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Sky.
I was going to ask what's the aperture, but of course, because it zooms, that kind of takes care of itself.
I think it's 67 degrees horizontal field of view, which is much longer than most of the ones that we've seen.
Yeah, because they're normally just wide fisheye looking
80,
things.
90, 130. They're a lot of them. And that's been, in my opinion, a mistake.
And then price point was the second question. And the third question was, Felipe, if you give it the live long and prosper, what does it do? Does it do anything?
No.
Makes your ears longer.
Exactly.
Taller ears.
And you become very logical. All right, Courtney.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you go between the presets, does it ease in the servos for pan and tilt? and if it's following you, is it fairly smooth? If it's in face tracking mode or if it's in tracking mode.
Felipe can probably show it. The follow, I think, is very smooth. Like it will, like if you move around Felipe, it'll,
okay.
Yeah, so it does that really well.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to move too much because it's in the teleprompter.
But if it's closer, you can. I think if you zoomed in a little bit more, you could.
Yeah. So if I get my office hours one, for example. Oh, hold on. After I set the preset, I have to turn on the auto tracking again.
And can you set the auto tracking to an object rather than a face, or is it just to face tracking?
I think it's only face tracking.
Yeah.
And the other problem is if you use that light as a tally light, it's going to show up back in the lens if it's behind the teleprompter glass because it's going to reflect into the overhead and probably show up.
Well, right now mine is behind the teleprompter and the light is on.
Maybe it's not bright enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you turn the lights off in the room, you might see it. Depends on if it's a dark or light scene.
I can.
Anyway, it's a great little product there. So anyway, yeah, no, don't see much of it. Yeah, it is pretty useful. So I think that again, mine crashes every once in a while when I test it. So one of the other things about it is that when you're in the interface and you want to reframe it, you're not telling it to go forward or back. You just click on the image and just move it to where you want it to be. I have run into a couple times where I do that and it just starts to drift and then it crashes. so it's still a new product, but it will, like if you move it around and do a lot of movement around it quickly. I have found, with the mouse, I have found that it has, mine at least has, it'll just start suddenly drifting one direction and then it falls off the cliff.
I think I would not try that right now.
Yeah, exactly. But you're doing everything else and it's fine. It's just it's the clicking on it seems to be a bug with clicking and moving a lot around because I was really excited about it and look at this, I can just move it here, I can move it here, and then it starts going whoa, and then it resets. Anyway,
Alex, what are you clicking on? What's the interface?
You can click on the actual. Let me see if I don't have mine hooked up. I don't know if Felipe can share that, but you can actually click.
Have it either.
I just don't have it set up to do that right now, but you can you see an image in the control interface for it. So when you open up the Insta360 control interface, you'll see a full-sized image of what's coming out of the webcam. Just click on that image, that video. It's a live video, and you just move it to where you want it to. You just drag it over. Like I want to see this instead. So it's super. It's super interactive. So it's definitely raised the stakes a lot. And the color rendition is really good. Sharpness, grain, everything. half-inch chip or almost a half-inch chip makes a big difference. So I think that it's gone a long way.
Multicam situation, you'd have to have OBS or Vimeo. vMix.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I don't know how part of it is I don't know how it would handle two cameras. Like, can it even identify more than one camera from the computer? Those are the kind of things we'd have to test. Because right now, it may be only single tenancy, which would be unfortunate because it would be really cool. But you could have a bunch of little, is it Mele's? Mele by Courtney. Now that it's no longer B-Link by Courtney. B-Link used to be by Courtney. But you could have one of those. You could theoretically have those, but then you'd have to, I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. So it's probably too early to do multicam with them because I bet you their software eventually will be able, they'll suddenly get a bunch of requests from people like us that say, hey, we need to be able to control like more than one camera at a time. And, but that's just a software update. So anyway, okay, we'll move on. Next question.
Michael Weber in Foxborough, Massachusetts has it, and I'm hoping this isn't cut off. It says, looking for mid-range wireless intercom options, needs to handle 6 to 8 headsets and a mix of single muff and dual muff headsets. Currently using EarTec's Comstar system, but often find other groups on site using the same system, and we have interference.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, depending on how many gigs you're doing a year, you might want to consider renting. There's a lot of folks that will rent these out that are in the Clearcom range or Riedel that are $20,000 plus. But if you want to own one, we just sold a couple months ago a set to Noah Sargent, who does a lot of gigs, and I just reached out to him in Discord to see how he liked it, and he just followed up with me. He originally bought the M1, which is this one here. And he says that he's selling this one. And the one that he bought from us recently is this much less expensive one.
And these are the Hollylands?
Yeah, this is the Holly one. So the first one he bought was the M1 at $7,000, and he's not happy with that one. In fact, he's selling that one. And he's happy with this 1,000-foot range, solid comp C1. They're not dual muff. So if you're doing like rock and roll shows where you're going to get a lot of noise, this may not be the solution, but I'm just going to suggest it anyway because nobody else was on the question. So this has the master, and then this is the remote, and you can see that it is, not dual muff. So it again may or may not be the right selection for you. But take a look at them. It's got the removable batteries. You go 5 hours on it, and then 1,000 feet, which is pretty amazing for that price point. When I see how much we spent on rentals, I probably could have just bought one of these. So something to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the same thing I was going to recommend. And so the Hollyland is I think a good medium cost. There's also I think they still make them. Clearcom used to sell an HME version of their comms. It's not the free speak, but it's a less expensive one, and we had it. I think that the Hollylands actually are probably a little bit more intuitive to work with than the HMEs that Clearcom had. But for the work that I do, the free speaks are kind of the standard. Riedel is something that some people get. It just takes a lot of management, and they're really expensive. Free speak is kind of less expensive, but still expensive. And then the Hollylands are what we see a lot in smaller teams. So I would definitely recommend looking at those. Go ahead, Bill.
Guy, did I see that has a 3.5-inch mini plug out as opposed to the 4-pin XLRs that are pretty typical in comms everywhere? And I wonder if that's rewirable so that you could use the world of double muff headsets in that system.
From what I understand, they're fully wireless.
Yeah, these are self-contained. So you just put headset on.
Yeah.
There's no belt.
What was I seeing down at the bottom where it had that little connector? That must have been something different.
Might have been on the other version on this one here. Yeah, this is on the M1. So the one this is the one that we're not recommending is M1, and it was actually a 3.5 to LEMO connection.
There you go. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question from Jonas Tatel in Stuttgart, Germany. Blackmagic Design adjusted the pricing of a lot of product. Here's a nice overview from Atem Tao, and he has a link there.
I'll go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, and when you look through the link, you'll see that most of the price increases are somewhere between 5 and 10%, which is probably about what we're seeing. We've actually seen that twice from some suppliers this year. But one thing I did want to say, which I do like about it, they've actually gone through, and some of the increases are a lot less. So they've actually done a pretty good job, a pretty fair job, I think, of probably pricing in the component increases rather than just blanket pricing everything.
Yeah, Sky.
Again, I was looking through the listing too, and it does have the price decreases, and it's on the software things that they aren't hamstrung by chips and or systems. So I'm trying to think of any other company that I've ever seen list this kind of a increase and decrease of the price line at the consumer level.
Hey, go ahead, John.
What's super interesting on this list is at the very, very bottom, the Ultimate 12 4K was previously $10,000. They dropped that all the way to $2,500. Interesting.
What? Okay, I missed that completely. They dropped the wait a minute. Sorry. So they dropped it from $10,000 to $2,500. Now that's just the Ultimate itself, right? The hardware. That's not the control panel.
It's the only thing it says on the list.
Yeah. So there's a control panel that is very hard. It's very hard to use the Ultimate without the control panel. One control panel can control multiple units of the Ultimate, but you do need one control panel, and I think that's a little bit more. But still, I think it's like $5,000 or $4,000. But the idea that you could get an Ultimate I mean, not that I'm bitter. I just want to put it in perspective for those of you who don't know the Ultimat, that I bought an Ultimat that was only 1080p, 3G though, and I paid extra for that, before Blackmagic bought it. So this is the 12K. So it's 4K 60, able to key, it's improved technology from what I bought. And I paid for the 3G version $33,000. So just to kind of put in perspective of how far we've come. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Big fan of Ultimat, and I paid more than that for the dongle when they had the software version of it.
Yeah. What I will say is that the keyer inside of the switchers, inside of our Atems, is really good. It is about 20% the quality of the Ultimat. So if you're looking for something like that, I've had the opportunity that Blackmagic sent this to me to test years ago for the 12K, and it is stunning. Like just a stunning keyer. So incredible. And it's been like one of those things like, oh, I should get one, but it's a little too expensive now. We'll have to see. All right. Next question.
Does Petro Vlahos come to your house and set it up for you?
Yeah, exactly. No, he does not. He doesn't even send me an email. Yeah, no. No, it's nothing. Like they just treat you like you're lucky to have one. So so it's the big thing is that, for a long time, Blackmagic, it appears, I mean, we just look at it from the outside, they find companies with great technology and bad business plans. And then and most of those companies don't know how to use surface mount, which is something that Blackmagic is really good at. And so Blackmagic's usually able to take the same technology that was in those pieces of hardware, whether it's Ultimat or Atems or Resolve or, all these other things, and highly automate the building of the boards in a way that wasn't there before. And that's part of what affects the price drop. And then also, and I think that this is totally reasonable for them to increase the price a little bit because they run at a much lower margin than most other companies, because they're really looking for a long-term relationship with customers that are buying stuff, not renting. Next question.
Mitchell of Wilmington, Delaware. The sun is ramping up for a new round of active solar flares. How are you prepared to deal with the potential of a massive coronal mass ejection event?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I saw on space.com yesterday that an unexpected flare is headed our way or got on its way to here. And it just got me thinking, we've talked about this before, the average flare might disrupt things a little bit. A CME event would be very serious, and I don't know how to protect against that.
The largest one that we've recorded is, I think, 1859 was the Carrington event, and that is that's the biggest one we know of, because before that we didn't have a lot of wire that was hanging everywhere. So we didn't, that was like a big antenna that captured it all. But what we know is that in 1859 you could see the northern lights in Cuba. And telegraph offices caught fire. So we need to understand that this is something that our government spends a fair bit of money on like talking about. And there's a really good paper, and I think it's from from 2014, among a bunch of scientists. It's about 192 pages. Well, with all the bibliography, I think it's probably more like 120 pages without all the bibliography. But and it really digs into this, that we need to pay attention to this, because no one really knows what the upper end of the potential is. We had a probe that was outside of our really far enough away from the Earth that the CME didn't destroy it, but we were able to measure it. And I think it was in 2000. I want to say 2012 or 2014. And I talked to someone who knows a lot about CMEs, and I said, well, what would have happened if he had hit it, if it hit the Earth? And he said, total destruction. And I said, well, how long would it take us to recover? And he goes, from that one, never. like that's what, like he said we'd lose half the population of the world in 10 years. You know, he said it was just, he says, now that doesn't happen very often. And the chances of it hitting, given the, 360 degrees of the, we are at 92 million miles away from the sun. We are, the chances of one hitting us is very low, because it has to be perfect, like spot on to hit it. But if it hits and it's that big, it could potentially be catastrophic, at least for the side of the Earth facing it, but potentially for the entire Earth. Basically, I mean, what he brought up, and I don't, I'm not an expert in it, but what he brought up is he says, we're not talking about destroying everything. We're talking about destroying everything that makes the things. Like, think about trying to build a chip fab when you don't have any electricity and you're starting with rocks. So he said, it could put us back into, and he said our entire infrastructure and population size and everything else is based on all this technology. And so if it gets wiped out, it's not a trivial thing. It's probably anyway, it's listed as a pretty high thing. There's a 12% chance per decade that a major CME event will occur. Not one the size that I talked about, but one that could take out power. And we've seen those in the past, Montreal in the 80s and
Could you give me a heads up so I can run up my credit card?
Yeah, exactly. Just run that credit card up. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've ordered 21 rolls of new metal foil I'm sending to my tailor to craft some new wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a, but there's a lot of folks that talk a lot about it. It's one of those things that sits out there as a theoretical, but a lot of people talked about pandemics and, we hadn't really seen a real pandemic either. So, it's not, we just need to know that, but there are people who are spending money and time, these are like basically putting things underground, saving things that don't have a lot of electronics, building communications, like how do you handle a catastrophic error and from a government structural perspective. All of those things are, loss of all the satellites. When you think about it, imagine a whole bunch of planes falling out of the sky and all our GPS not working. So those are
all those movies that are stored on hard drives and those deep in those salt mines survive. So we'll just be able to sit around and
watch old movies that were only the ones that made it to the salt mine. So anyway, it is something that you there's nothing you can really do about it. It's kind of you have to be careful of worrying too much about events that you can't affect. I will say that after talking to him, after having this conversation, this was a conversation in DC that I had, I've gotten much better at cooking. Like cooking from single ingredients became kind of an obsession of mine. And so I don't know if it'll make any difference, but I definitely have a lot more there, but I'm not building up stores of anything. I'm just trying to be more effective if I need it. So that's the minor adjustment that I've made, but that's about it. Otherwise, you just have to live with it. There's a lot of bad things that can happen in the world. And this is probably a lower on the ring of what might actually happen.
You have to get very good at the feldspar souffle there.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Up next, Atem Software Control allows the user to capture a still image. Is there a way to export this image for use in other applications?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so on my Mac, I go to Movies, I go to Atem, and then there's a subdirectory in there called Atem Media Pool, and you'll find it as a PNG file in there.
Yeah, and you can also just save as from the Atem and just put it somewhere you want. It'll save everything over to it, to something so that in the save as menu. So Nigel's absolutely correct. That's where it'll keep it all the time. But if for some reason you just want to grab it and save it out, you can do that. It'll save everything you have in your media pool. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. What's been your preferred resource for JavaScript coding assistance?
The web. I don't know of any specific one. JavaScript and Python are probably the most documented coding structures in the world. Go ahead, John.
There's some great videos on YouTube specifically on JavaScript. And then once you learn JavaScript, learn Node after that.
Next question.
Mitch Hill in Wilmington, Delaware here on the panel. My Apple iPhone is now producing short videos with music featuring my dog. How is this possible?
Oh, are you talking about the ones where it just goes through
spontaneously creates a movie and says, hey, I got a movie for you. And it's like, that's my dog. How'd they do that? With music.
AI.
Somebody's getting out of work.
Yeah, a little machine learning there. Go ahead, Bill.
Scariest thing would be if you got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and found your dog huddled with your iPhone making his own videos. That would freak me out.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Courtney.
I'd check with your dog to see if he's secretly obtained an agent.
Yeah, exactly. There could be some performance rights there that haven't been taken into account. Every time it plays, I hear he gets a biscuit. So anyway, but I think that, what's really interesting is that how long Apple's been working on this stuff. So, first they, do all the facial. So when it first started coming out, you can go in to the facial recognition and say, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's, you know, my daughter. This is, you know, you can identify people, and it starts to build that connection. And yeah, it'll just throw those together. It builds lots of them, and it's I find them actually really good. Like, it's just they're really well put together. Go ahead, John.
Mitchell, your dog has been listening to Office Hours for the past year, so there you go.
I mean, it's not out of the question. I mean, it could be just learning Final Cut while you're not looking. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, in a little bit of seriously here, back in the days when Final Cut first came out, one of the things they had was a system that identified single shots, two shots, and group shots, and they could categorize it through their machine learning and artificial intelligence basic algorithms. So I'm pretty sure what they're doing is they've applied that, and everything with a dog shape they identify as being a dog clip, and then they assemble these lovely little mini movies. And I enjoy them too. I mean, I think I see one about every week, and I usually watch them through, and about half the time I end up sharing them with my wife because I think they've done a good job of just encapsulating a little part of my life that I didn't have to do anything to get done.
I just find it funny that they find photos that I didn't remember I took. Like, I haven't seen those photos in a long time, and they're looking at your entire library. And if you're someone like me that, you know, probably at this point 99% of the photos that I take are on my iPhone, it really is my, you know, my life, you know, like, you know, and around me is, you know, these photos. It's a really fascinating thing that they're doing there. And I believe it's all done on the phone. I don't think it's a cloud operation. You know, I believe. So it's interesting. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. It was reported that podcast guests are paying up to $50,000 US to appear on popular shows. That comes to us via Bloomberg News. This seems like simple advertising to me. Why are people surprised that it happens?
Go ahead, Sky.
I'm looking at this question and I'm realizing there's a generational situation going on here and an economic issue, because again, a lot of this equipment and the ability to get in front of people used to be very, very expensive. But now my children are 30. So, but they've not been watched broadcast television for 20 plus years. So it's not normal. I mean, it's not surprising to them that somebody would, you know, spend money to be in front of their eyeballs. So I'm wondering who the people that are surprised are in your question, Chris.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, this is not surprising. You look at publicists, and what used to be, you know, publicists would book a celebrity or something on Regis and Kathy Lee or something to get on, you know, on a regional or a you know, cable news channel appearance of some sort. But now you have these influencers that have 4.5 million viewers or followers. They have much higher ratings than almost any regional or even national newscast or public affairs show. So it makes a lot of sense for dollars versus exposure.
Go ahead, Nigel.
There are a lot of strange business models at the moment. There's somebody who emails me once a month telling me they'll help me perform better on podcasts and radio shows. Just for a small amount, they will train me. And every week, a different magazine says that I may have been nominated for some award, and for $1,500, they will let me know. So I think you have to be, those who know the difference know the difference.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a bunch of us that have been discussing this actual article for a little while. And most of the folks that I know that are larger influencers are not doing too much of where people are paying to appear. Obviously, they're getting sponsors. And the return on the sponsorships are really high for the advertisers. I mean, oftentimes 2 or 3 times as high as a standard ad on a TV station. So especially when you have some influencers that are now cresting 100 million followers. And, you know, a given show, if you think about, you know, if they can put out a video every week that reaches 60 million people, that's bigger than most shows on TV. And so I think that, I mean, almost all the shows on TV. And so you're starting to see influencers that are really influential and really kind of pushing that down. And these are big, I mean, these are not a influencer doing something on their own. These are, you know, large teams that are putting together these videos. And so I think it's just become a big business. I do think that one of the problems when folks aren't clear, I mean, obviously there's some FTC requirements, But I think that one of the big challenges is really that we keep on not believing anything that we see anymore. And so, and I think that that's the challenge for influencers, is that you get to a point where you go, well, I don't. And I think that's, again, I've said this before, I think that it's healthy for us not to necessarily believe everything we see. But I think that it is a challenge for influencers, because you start seeing things and you go, oh, that looks really cool, but they probably doesn't work. That probably doesn't do that. Like on TikTok, definitely, like any cooking thing that you see now, I just go, well, maybe that'll work. Unless it looks really obvious, I don't believe that it's actually a thing. Go ahead, John.
One way to normalize marketing dollars is cost per mille, right? So cost per thousand. And you can do a comparison between what you're going to pay on Facebook ads versus what you're going to pay on the radio versus TV, and do that equation. And demographics are important too, but that's one way to normalize what a marketing spend would look like. Works for me.
It is. I think the big thing is whether there's it also the responsiveness of the audience. So when an influencer says you should do something, it commands, they're going to have a lot more people moving towards it, as opposed to a regular ad on a TV, because we've been trained from childhood to ignore ads, so, we don't really look at things nearly the same way on TV that we do if we have an influencer, and the influencer, especially if they say this is a great thing, like something like Twit will command a much higher CPM, cost per thousand than YouTube, like a general YouTube ad, because people are a lot more interested in what Leo thinks is good than what shows up on an ad on YouTube. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener again in Lafayette, Indiana. How does the Insta360 Link compare to the obsbot Tiny 4K? Obsbot comes with a good case, he notes.
Yeah, I tempted to buy one to test this, but just this is a hole that I keep on digging into here. But it would be good to have the obsbot and the Link in the same room, just to figure out whether they look any different. I from what I've seen from the obsbot, it felt like it was more grainy than what I'm seeing with this. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but maybe it was just the settings that it was on. I haven't seen the interface for the obsbot either, but I would be surprised if it's better than the Insta360. It really felt like they really thought this out. So hopefully I can get a hold of an obsbot and we'll test it. Next question.
Next one comes from Lois Richter in Davis, California. What does the radio 5x5 mean?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I clicked. See, I wasn't coming in 5x5 there because my click didn't work. It's an old radio signal core or amateur radio term. No one's really sure where it came from. It has to do with signal strength and clarity. So 5 being the greatest strength and greatest clarity. So if you're 5x5, you're full strength and fully intelligible for clarity sake, and if you're less than that, you're probably not doing well. It doesn't make much. Doesn't have much use in the digital world, because signal strength and clarity, either you get it or you don't. So there's no gradations between 1 and 5 anymore for digital transmission.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Thank you, Courtney. That clears that up. But when you're watching the Thunderbirds in Super Mario Nation and they go FAB, what's that mean?
Means it's fabulous.
Maybe.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Lois Richter again in Davis, California. I want to attach something to the wall. I know how to find a stud, measure from the edge, thump the wall, drive a thin nail through the wallboard. But how would I find a solid wood above my flat residential ceiling? How much weight can that take safely?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if you join the 20th century, Lois, you can find these wonderful stud finders. This one you can get for around $25 on Amazon VivReal, and you can set this one for a stud, for deep mounted stud, metal studs, which is a lot of modern construction has, or AC. It can detect live wires in the walls, and you don't want to hammer something into a live wire. So something like that would be a good investment. It shows you where the middle of the stud is, and you can use it on ceilings or walls. And it'll detect metal studs, and it'll let you know if it's a metal or wood stud, because in a lot of construction these days, they use metal framing for the walls to put the sheetrock on. So you got to be careful. You're not going to hammer a nail into a metal stud. So that's the best way.
Good, Bill.
I just want to be careful because I've been in a couple of old houses over the course of the years and lived in them. And what's behind walls and ceilings have changed over the course of the eon. So if you have anything that's at all historical, be very careful. You might be just dealing with standard wallboard. You might be dealing with lath and plaster or something else. And as to the amount of weight that it will hold, it depends on the construction and whether they follow the building codes assiduously. There are building codes that say the dimension of lumber that has to go into framing walls and ceiling and so forth. If they kept to that, most ceiling studs will hold a reasonable amount of weight. Although I have had circumstances where I've hung in the old days CRT-based TVs. They did fine for about a year, and then I came back one day and the whole stud and everything had been pulled out of there. Substantial weight. So if you're hanging like a heavy bag for boxing or something like that, be careful because over time that will pull even something built to building codes down. I've had it happen.
Yeah, so the stud itself will hold a lot of weight, but whatever you're screwing into it may or may not. It's how much grab your screw is going to have. I mean, we've attached a lot of things to those. I will say I try to avoid connecting myself to residential architecture. Like that's just generally something in overall that I try to avoid because it's permanent. It's where you're living. You can do a lot of damage pretty quickly, and so usually the way I've done it. And I've built into those, and this may be more than what you want to do, Lois, but the way I've done it is really building, doing, basically stand-up poles, that are, these are in each corner. Then I'm connecting them and building them and having them all. And then what you do is you can have little spacers here that push up against the walls to build a grid. Now that may turn your room into more than you want, but it's completely freestanding. All the weight goes down on the corners, and you don't have anything attached to the actual wall itself. I would really think through trying to figure that out before I screwed something in. And I have to admit, as a non-carpenter and a non-electrician, when I want to attach something or do something to the walls, I hire somebody that does this all day. I don't try to figure it out because this is, again, you can do amazing amount of damage really, really fast when you haven't done it before. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm gonna plus one on that. I here use Manfrotto auto poles. I don't hang anything directly into the ceiling. The other thing is that you will find yourself sooner or later in facing a drop ceiling. I remember that drop ceilings are hung on just very thin wires, and there are scissors clips that allow you to attach loads, but that is such a lightweight system that if you're not careful, you will pull that down even with medium-sized lights.
I will say drop ceilings, I put a lot, multiple 4x4s and Divas all hanging from a drop ceiling without any bend at all. Like the drop ceilings are amazingly resilient. It's a really, I've pushed the envelope of that pretty far and haven't found the edge yet, but pretty sure I got close. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next again. Alex, I know you've advocated avoiding the 14-inch MacBook Pro for serious mobile production. If you needed maximum portability, would most music and or audio applications and Resolve work on a 14-inch screen if coming from a 15-inch screen?
Go ahead, Guy.
It'll work, but the problem also is the keyboard and just how big your hands, if you're trying to do a lot type long form, that keyboard's pretty cramped. I'd suggest going to the Apple Store or your local Best Buy, whatever has one on display, and trying it. What we've done in this situation is get this big monster. This is a 17-inch 4K portable USB monitor that you just plug in, and it gets the power from the computer, and it's got VESA mount on the back, and this actually turns into a stand. So this thing is the stand. So this is about $650 on Amazon, and Tucker and Greg and a couple of us are using this to be able to do shows portably and still have massive screen real estate if we're going to do any kind of edits or anything like that. So if you're going to get the 14-inch, because I mean, it is a heck of a deal in comparison cost-wise, and then just throwing it in a backpack. But this fits in my backpack along with the laptop, and I'm still carrying the 15-inch i9 previous generation.
Good, Bill.
The other thing I've done is just use one of the new IPS USB-C monitors, the flat panels. You can get them from places. Mine are from Kagoda. They're available on Amazon. But there are a lot of things that make relatively large or medium-sized external screens. So if you just need more screen real estate, if you're just frustrated with the 14 inches pure size and you're not bothered by that keyboard size difference, then an external screen might be enough for you.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Is a cargo container a safe repository for electronics during a major EME event like Alex was talking about?
CME.
Yeah, I thought maybe electromagnetic event, but whatever. Does it need to be deep underground?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
No, it doesn't. But what I would do is a Faraday cage if you're concerned, and it would a well-grounded Faraday cage. But here's the problem. All the stuff that's in there, including yourself, when you come out, you have to deal with the rest of the world, and it's going to be a mess.
I don't think it's worth me. I will say that, again, I got better at cooking. Like, I decided that was my adjustment, which is benefiting me today, every day. Like that I'm good at cooking, and I'm good at cooking from single ingredients. I'm healthier. I'm not really doing anything for the future. I'm just doing things that are good for today and also would help in the future. But I wouldn't get too close. I wouldn't get too into trying to save yourself from this. The chances of it truly impacting you in a catastrophic way in your lifetime is, it's probably lower than being a car accident. Go ahead, Courtney.
And just make sure you put a generator in there with all of your electronic equipment, because that electronic equipment won't do you any good if the entire grid is down for a year and a half. So it'll be lots of fuel and a generator, and put it in there.
Yeah, but again, it's I don't think that I wouldn't spend too much time preparing. This is not one that I would really prepare for. It's too holistic. Like, it's like preparing for an earthquake. I mean, you want some first aid stuff there, but if it's really bad, you're going to need more. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace again in Austin, Texas. Is there a way to automate or store settings for different screen configurations with the LG Quad monitor?
I don't know. Guy, you have one of these, don't you?
I do. It has some software, but when I went to install it, it wanted to do a bunch of stuff to my computer. And so I said, I don't want to do that. It wanted to install some like old Microsoft VC lib files. And it was just like, right. I can't risk it on this production machine. So I chose to just use the remote control.
So you'll have to let us know, Paul. All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. AWS, Amazon Web Services, vMix in the cloud, OBS, SRT Miniserver, Larix Broadcaster, NDI5 Bridge. What do you want to see at 10 a.m. PST in the After Hours Lab?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Hi, I'm there. It sounds like a great thing. But if I were to add one more thing to the list, the winning Powerball would be a great thing to show.
It already happened. Someone already won. It's already it's back down to 30 million. Yeah, it's over. It's over, man. You're not going to win this one. I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited to see where we take this. And so this is 10 o'clock every Wednesday.
I can't guarantee. We'll see how many people show up. I mean, I was up until midnight last night, just making sure everything was working, fired up like 5 cloud instances and updated software. And I spent a bunch of time getting it ready. So hopefully some people show up and take a look at what it is. Because it's exciting. Like when I saw 4K coming out of my iPhone, I did a graphic up in Livestream Studio, shot it back down, and I was like clicking my fingers like this, and it was showing up within milliseconds, like less than a second. Yeah. It's powerful stuff. So, and
all right. So this is 10 o'clock.
To sell here. It's all just pure knowledge giving. I'm not. Yeah. So it's all free.
Yep. 10 o'clock this morning after. So we have Ken talking about web development at 9 o'clock right after the show. And then Guy is we're going to have this lab at 10 o'clock. And I would highly recommend it, mostly because we have to show up. We're going to learn a lot of great things. We have to show Guy that it's important, so he comes back and does it again. And maybe it's once a month. Maybe it's not every week. Maybe it's, we break it up. So we'll work that out. But let's jump into it. And then hopefully tomorrow we get a little report from Guy or some of the folks that were there and find out how it went and whether we want to keep doing that. But I think it's really important that we pay a lot of attention to this. So
are we capturing these? Because I've got a client come in at 9:30 this morning and it's driving me nuts.
Are we set up to capture from I don't know if we're set up to capture from a breakout room.
I think Ken records his in a breakout room. I'm not sure. We might have to reach out to Ken and see how
they told me for the Final Cut stuff, if it's in a breakout room, it was possible to record it. It isn't if you're in the main room, but I don't. That was just
the other way around, actually.
Is it?
So I think that I don't think you can stock record it from Zoom, but we can. I'm okay with having somebody go in and record it. Just record the main area there, but I don't know if you can record it otherwise. So we'll find out. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. I just watched the Ron Howard film 13 Lives about the Thai boys soccer team cave rescue. I watched it too. Great movie. Telling an emotionally captivating story when the whole world knows the outcome is really quite a feat. Any thoughts?
Go ahead, Nigel.
This seems to be a Ron Howard special. I mean, he's done a number like this. Amongst Apollo 13, you've got Rush, which is one of my favorite. You've got Frost Nixon, which is great. And Sky is more the story master than I am. But I always think it's interesting when a filmmaker can take something that's going to happen, but tell the story within the story that makes it more interesting. And I think one of the best examples of that to me is Argo. No spoilers, but, they get away. And if you watch the film, there are certain points you start to wonder whether you've remembered it wrongly. Yeah. And I think that's a good filmmaker.
Yeah, good, Sky.
No, I so appreciate Ron Howard's storytelling abilities. And I love Nigel's point about the story within the story. That's usually the sign of a good master storyteller, which is Ron's been doing it for years, lots of practice. And of course, he was raised in the industry from a television perspective. And now that he's making feature films, he understands the different technology that it takes, the different timing schedule that it takes. But the closest I've gotten to this particular story is the Reader's Digest version. And I get so claustrophobic, and I already have an amazing imagination. I don't know if I can watch this movie.
Good.
but if it's a story about a story, I probably could.
Yeah, good, Bill.
I think you got to give it a shot. One of the things that impressed me so much about it, my wife said, looking at the listing, I'm not sure I can handle that. I'm really tired tonight. And it's 2.5 hours long. And I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like a roaring action film. She was riveted the entire 2.5 hours, as was I. And that is the filmmaker's art. When you can take something that doesn't have, explosions and the rest of that stuff and make it compelling for that long a stretch, it means that you had somebody with a good story to tell, but who understood how to release the story pieces in a way that was totally engaging and kept you riveted on the screen. He's just very good at what he does, and we're lucky to have him.
Yeah, I think it's really what he's doing is so valuable in the sense that he's taking things and we're going to remember them because we really had the story against it. It's not all the facts, it's not all the dry data, but he made it something that we can remember, and because he tied it all together and pulled out the meaningful parts and connected them. And I think he's doing a great job at it. A little bit of the backstory for 13 Lives, I happen to work on something connected to it, is that this was done a while ago, and they were going to release it, I think, last fall. And the audience responses were so high, and the reviews were so high. They were like, "Oh, I don't think we're going to release it during a slow time. We're going to release it, really when it's going to." Have real legs. So it got delayed a lot to do that, and so I'm planning to see it this weekend. I couldn't see it when it was released last weekend, but I'm definitely going to sit down and watch it because I hear from every person that saw it that it's just an amazing film about something that was really important and really interesting, just how they figured it out. Next question.
There's also a beat behind the scenes that Ron Howard talks about on, I think, the Variety Channel or something like that. That's worth it, but don't watch that before you watch the movie. Go to the movie as cold as you can. David Brady.
Yeah, go ahead.
David Brady, New York City. Are there any good pan-tilt zoom cameras that can provide a nice, sweet bokeh? Most I've seen have a deeper depth of field.
Yeah, go ahead, it's Guy.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the size of sensor on a camera that you're going to get, this deep depth of field. About the best that I could recommend is Photo Joseph did this video here on the data video setup, which is not a true pan tilt zoom camera, but you can see he sticks the BGH1 on there with the tilt-a-nucleus motor. And so he's able to get zoom, focus, and iris all in one. But when you watch his sample video, he takes it to a bar and then he shows, and it might just be the not so great lenses that he uses, but everything's in focus. And I'm like, dude, why? And it might be just because he didn't want to pull focus on a lot of this stuff, or it doesn't look too fast action to me. I would have went with, he's got a mountain of lenses behind him. I just don't understand why he didn't showcase. But this is the BGH one with the micro four thirds sensor. They do make another model of that camera. That's the BSH one that has the Super 35, or you could stick whatever you want on there. You could stick a Pocket 6K on that data video head, and you could cruise this thing around. It's really cool. I bought one of these myself. I haven't thrown a big camera on it yet because you are limited to about 7 pounds on this system. So it's pretty slick. That'd be, I mean, the other thing you could look at is the biggest monster one is the 1 inch on the Bird Dog. Bolin makes it as well. Sony has the Exmor. They're almost all the Sony sensors that are the 1 inch, besides Panasonic makes theirs, and that's the UE 150, and you're looking at 10 grand. And then the other trick is to just zoom in. If you can throw the camera back, push in, so you're basically shooting across the room, and that's going to give your depth of field just that more shallow look as you can compress that field of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we've used for the PTZs is a bigger version of what you saw Photo Joseph use. I mean, so our typical ones have been Blackmagic Ursas with Cabrio lenses and telemetrics heads, which are $30,000 per unit. So for all the pieces that are required there. But we've also in our smaller packs used the BRC 1000s, which are the Sony 1 inch one that are there. The advantage of the Panasonics, in addition to being 1 inch chip as well, and both the Panasonics and the BRCs are 1 inch chips. The Panasonic will send and receive telemetry data, which I don't think that the Sonys will, and that allows it to tie into Unreal more effectively. And so that's some of the big advantages there. And I don't have any experience with the Bird Dogs, but I'm sure they're great. They've been doing a lot of good work. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace again in Austin, Texas. How does Felipe have his Insta360 Link mounted? Well, Alex, keep using the Elgato for his.
I don't know how Felipe has his. It sounds like he put it on in his teleprompter, so he probably just put it on the mount. It's a 1/4-20 mount, so you can put it on anything you want. I put it on this Elgato because I was testing the Elgato arm. I was trying to, we were looking at something a little less expensive than the one that I have, the OC White. I keep wanting to say EB White. It's not EB White. That's a author. Anyway, so the OC White is the one that I have with this mic. I have been testing the Elgato. It's definitely. Here's what I'll say about the Elgato arm in general, just to go off. It is definitely a third as good as the OC White, but it's probably the best arm under $250. There's definitely fit and finish that I'm used to with my arm. It's not in the Elgato. But what I will say is that the Elgato is super useful. I know that Shannon just got one and was super happy. I'm using it right now just because I was testing it. It happens to be sitting here. And it actually works pretty well for what I'm trying to do. And just being able to move it over, kind of get it set for something I want to look at. So we'll see if I keep it there. But right now it's working pretty well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Chris says, since MCE was mentioned, have you ever looked at and it's got opensourceecology.org, a link there? I haven't looked at the link.
Yeah, it's hard for us to get to things that quickly after 7. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think he meant a CME there, but it looks like a Lego kind of construction set, so you can build fabrication devices and things of that nature. But
so we're gonna be reduced to Legos. All right, next question.
Next question comes to us from Lois Richter in Davis, California. Again, I wonder how many folks have bought that. Insta360 Links have been old in the last half hour.
Yeah, exactly. we're moving fast, so I think a lot of us are probably getting these. They look pretty solid. Next question.
J.J. McKenna in Santa Venetia, California. The Mele Quieter2 tested with a Zoom room was not successful. What is a good replacement that will support rooms in a small form factor?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you might. I haven't tried it yet. I have the Quieter 3, and they come in 2 form factors. There's this one, which is really compact and is fanless, and another one that's fanless that they also make. This is Mele. It's a lot bigger, but basically the same processor. This is the PG35. It has no fans in it. That strange red stuff is the airflow heatsink that's in there. But the actual CPU board is about the size of the one that's in here. And this one has a terabyte. I put a terabyte NVMe drive in it. And I would like to try it with the Zoom room. It may not allow you to do 1080p, but it'll do 720 probably. And if you had some stuttering, it may have been a problem with the Windows audio drivers for Windows 11. I've had that happen, and I've had stuttering audio. The video looks fine, but the audio stutters out of the HDMI port for some reason, and I think it has to do with the buffering of their HDMI A to D converter in Windows 11, so maybe they'll iron that out. But if you have more bucks than $300 to spend, you might look at something from B-Link by Courtney. This new GTR 5900HX is a Ryzen 9 based. It's $719 as configured there with 32 gigs of RAM and 500 gigabytes of internal storage. It has 2 LAN ports. I think one of them is 2.5 gigs. So, and it has a HDMI and full-size display port, as well as plenty of USB 3 and USB 2 ports, and a C port on the front, which I think also handles video. And that Ryzen 9 is an 8-core processor with 16 threads, so that should be able to handle any Zoom room up to 1080p for sure. So you might look at that, but it's about 719 in its minimum configuration, and it's a small PC.
So I see that you've kept you're holding on to your relationship with B-Link. I hope that
I haven't completely alienated them yet.
All right. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Is it possible to totally back up a Centos server and restore it using a Synology network attached storage system?
I don't know if we know. Yeah, I don't think we have an answer for that. Next question.
The next one comes from Douglas Carmichael again, and this time he says, when you are creating a complex Isadora patch with many actors, how can you consolidate a large group of actors into one proxy actor?
And that is going to be, I think that not enough Isadora experts here. So it was Thursday, and I know the email went out this morning, and I didn't get it changed before it went out. But Elle will be here on Friday at 9 o'clock. Elle has a conflict with Thursday, and so but Friday, and really the time to ask Isadora questions is during the lab with Elle. So 9 o'clock and after hours is the time to ask those. He's the expert. We're not. We're working on it. We're learning from Elle, but probably he's the right person to ask. So come to that on Friday 9 o'clock. It's usually on Thursday. Next week it'll be on Thursday. This week it's on Friday. So but come on Friday at 9 o'clock for that answer. All right, we're going to jump into our second hour and talk a little bit about LiDAR. And, I think a lot of it is, a lot of this is starting to pick up speed because we hear about LiDAR a lot. And really my goal is to hopefully, answer questions related to that. I think we just got rid of all our LiDAR questions. They were here and then they were gone. But the goal here is that LiDAR is becoming more and more important. We're seeing it on our phones. We're seeing it. We see specials about Cambodia. We see, and so I wanted to kind of start to distinguish different kinds of LiDAR and talk through some of those issues and try to explain it. I'm going to do less slides and more drawing just to kind of try to explain how all this stuff works. I will show you a couple slides of stuff that we've done in the past so that you can get kind of a sense of how we use it. I think that it's important to understand that there's a lot of different ways that LiDAR is used, and they're not the same. This is basically fundamentally LiDAR is light detection and ranging, and so how LiDAR actually works, and again, it works in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different levels of accuracy. So essentially what LiDAR is doing is it's saying, I'm going to send out a signal, a light, not a signal, but a light. And that can be in a variety. It can be it can be invisible light, ultraviolet, infrared. Those are all different ones. Infrared is probably the one that we see the most. I'm going to send out a signal, and then I'm going to measure its time of flight. How fast does it come back? And so, or how fast do I see it? So basically, you're sending that signal out, and what it does is that as it starts to hit things, it starts to see, it makes a decision very accurately of how far away different things are from whatever's emitting that light. Now, this can happen at a very high rate. So basically, a lot of scanners will run anywhere from 60,000 points a second. That's going to be a relatively slow SX10 is designed for other things, and I'll show you a picture of it. But 60,000 points a second, and it can get into the millions, into the I think the most I've seen is 6 million points a second. Now, what it's doing is it's spinning, and it has the high resolution ones that we use on site they have a spinning sensor and receiver, so it's constantly spinning and just basically drawing a line and going around it. So you have a scanner that's basically here, and I'll show some pictures in a second, that has a slit, and the scanner just slowly rotates around, and it's just grabbing onto one slice at a time. It just spins out, and measures it and just goes slowly around. You can't move it. No, this is different than what we have on our iPhones, but this is the most accurate version of what these are. And we talk about these being, it depends on what distance, but these might be accurate, at 30 meters, at 90 feet. These might be accurate down to a quarter inch. It's pretty darn accurate. And so these, now the other thing that they do is they can distinguish how things are being reflected. So for instance, vegetation reflects these differently than the ground, for instance. And what's nice about it, it means you can scan something. This is what came out in Cambodia. You can scan something and you know what the difference is between the ground and the vegetation. You just remove the vegetation. It's like, I don't want the trees. Just all the trees disappear because it knows how it was different when it hit it. And so essentially, that's and really to think about what we're talking about here is there are a couple different versions of this that you'll see a lot of people on YouTube talking about aircraft-based LiDAR, because that's what's gotten most press, and they'll say, well, most people use aircraft. That's not right. That's not accurate. The most people are the vast majority of LiDAR is being used by architectural engineering and surveying and everything else. And there's just a massive amount of people using it. It's used all the time during construction to figure out exactly what's going on. And I have some friends that are doing a lot of this, and they send out a lot of this. And a lot of people think that they're going to be able to do it with aircraft. It's not accurate enough to do that. Aircraft is the kind of the sexy version of that. And for some folks, and again, if you have questions, go ahead and throw those in. But a lot of folks are, when it comes to this, they get excited because they saw, that in Cambodia, or they saw the stuff that's happened in Central America, where they're scanning huge areas and suddenly pulling out all these villages they didn't know existed. They suddenly realized that Angkor Wat was the largest city in the world, or that they know of, in the 12th century or 13th century. It was like way bigger than London. So like 2 or 3 times the size of London at that time. And so, but they didn't know that until they flew planes over top of it. But basically this time of flight, this idea that I'm going to emit, can be done from space. It can be done from a plane. It can be done from a stationary unit. And I'll show you a picture here. Let me grab this here real quick, just to give you an idea of what some of these look like. So I'll show you a couple slides just to get you thinking about these, and we'll talk about the phone as well. But let's talk about this. So this is an SX10, and I was, as an example here, Fred Fikert, who I will bring on. I wanted to have this time for us to all talk before I bring Fred on, because Fred does this all day, every day, and so Fred and I, we like to go out and have fun with LiDAR. So anyway, this is my family has my brother runs a golf course. So we have we turned a farm into a golf course. And so one of the little things that we did here was we this is a SX10, and basically what we did is map all of this, this whole thing with LiDAR. Now, this is what, again, when I talked about it, here's what you can see are these. This is the lens that's sending, that's emitting that out, right? And these, and this one's a relatively slow one. The advantage of the SX10 specifically is that basically what you have are these, it's a surveying tool as well. So this is just a reflector. And what we do is if we survey exactly, so what we'll do here is right over down here, we put a GPS signal, and we connected it to other places in Pennsylvania that we are known, their GPS is known. It's been highly measured. We know exactly where those are. And there's a whole map of all of these for surveyors to use. We know where those are. And when you triangulate those points with radio, you can get down to millimeters, of where this point is. So this point was in the parking lot, whatever. And then basically what we do there is from there, we measure, this is a radio receiver. It's both a GPS receiver and it's a radio receiver that's going to be able to error correct back to that original point that we spent a lot of time. This one, what I was talking about here down here, this takes like a half an hour, 45 minutes for it to calibrate. Once it's calibrated, everything happens quickly. Now what happens is now what we do is we put this guy in a certain space, measure it out at a certain height. And then what we're able to do is take this one and put it right in the same space at the same height as the receiver. Now we know where this is. What's the advantage of the advantage of the the advantage of this is that when this can do two things. One is it can do the LiDAR, but it also is a surveying tool. So it can measure the distance from it out to that reflector. And what happens is by doing that, we're building if we put one here and put one here and put one here, we're getting the scans, but we're also error correcting what we call a geodetic network, between here to basically tighten the solution of knowing where each one of these are in real space. And so basically we do multiple scans, but we're also doing multiple survey points, and being able to put those out. Now all those scans, and I'll see if I can pull up a scan here for you in a second. But all those scans will allow us to, we then can use features. So, you see this tree or this hill, and you can match those hills and those trees right over top of each other for each scan. And then that's going to lock them together. So you can say, this is an automatic process. Most software will now do that. And you just grab these two things and lock them together. And the kind of software, you can open what are called E57 files, which are a lot of what's generated here as you can open them as, in something like MeshLab. MeshLab's free. So if you want to see that, that's what I'm going to open it up and show it to you here. You can open up in MeshLab and export it out from there. There's the big tools that are used for this are, the biggest one is called Trimble Business Center, TBC. It's the worst name. Like Trimble does a lot of this. They build the SX10. And it's just the worst. Like whoever thought of that needs to go back to square one. Anyway, so but it will do a lot of the calibration and so on and so forth. Now this is a much smaller one. This is a what's called a Leica BLK360. I'm actually getting this, buying a used one. I'm actually buying this one from a friend of mine, so that we can all have fun with LiDAR. So we're going to have this introduction, and then I'll start pumping out LiDAR that you can actually play with if you want. You have to contact me and decide if you want to talk about LiDAR that much. Anyway, but you'll see this little mirror in here, and this is what spins. So this spins, and this thing slowly turns on its base, and it will slowly scan out a space. Now, what do we use this for? Well, some of the places that we've used it, I don't have the point clouds for these, but this is one of the places that we did it. So this is Bayan Temple in Angkor Wat, and basically we're scanning this. We walked around and scanned what we could in this area, and now this is not going to be as high resolution as photogrammetry, but it is more accurate. And the distinction between this is really what we call structured light versus unstructured light. So the time of flight, the LiDAR is what we call structured light because it knows exactly where it is. It's not guessing. It's not triangulating. It's going, that point is that far away from me. Whereas unstructured light, which is photography, is the photogrammetry. I mean, photography-based photogrammetry is unstructured. We don't really know what the distances are. We just see pixels and we match those pixels up and then we put it together. And the real power is using both of these together, because and the reason that this isn't as accurate, or it's more accurate but less. The reason that LiDAR is more accurate but less dense, lower resolution, is because if you think of it, as it exits, these lines are very close together. But as they go further out, this is gonna be a horrible drawing, they get further apart. So as objects are further away from the LiDAR, they're getting less and less points measuring where they are. So the LiDAR may go 100 meters or 500 meters out, but remember that each ray that comes out of it is further and further apart as it goes further away. And so it may be, and when you see a scan, I'll show you a scan, and when you see it, it's you'll see that it's very high resolution when it's near you, and then it becomes less and less resolution as it gets further away. The advantage of photogrammetry is just looking at pixels, and so no matter how many, it's infinite, depending on the resolution. You can keep on getting closer and closer to it and getting more and more data. So, but it's not as accurate, and it can get warped, and it cannot be. You don't know exactly what the measurements are. By being able to tie both of these together, that's what we're working on in a lot of areas. Now, this is a project that I've been working on for years that I fiddle with. This is the more practical application of something that I do. So here you can see, I might have grabbed the wrong photo, but usually here it is. So here you can see that BLK 360 right in here. It's kind of hard to see in this area, but what I'm doing is I'm measuring my setup. So I'm going, if I ever need to set this up again, I know exactly where everything sits. And I can build a model of my setup, of this is how we were happy with the way this looked, and this is exactly what we did to get that. And so that's a really powerful way to use one of these scanners. And it's actually why I'm buying one, is just because as I do setups and as I do site surveys, instead of doing a site survey where you're measuring everything and taking photos, you just take the scanner and set it down and hit go, and it's just going to grab everything it can see. It can tell you how far away it is. And so that, if you're trying to do pre-visualization and so on and so forth, this can be a really powerful tool. It takes about, typically, it depends on how accurate you want it. So with these scanners, it can be it can take as long as 45 minutes or an hour to do one scan. That means that it's using every pixel it can. It's oversampling, so it's doing it a couple times to make sure that it's accurate. It'll be more accurate, but usually for what I do, about 8 minutes a scan. Because I don't have that kind of time. So I usually, I set it to be not quite as accurate, not quite as dense, but it's going to gather that data really quickly, because we're not going to use this data that we get out of this. We're going to basically, we're going to snap to it, for instance, and build models in SketchUp or in Cinema 4D or something like that. So basically that's how we use these in production. To make that actually work. And so let me see if I can, anyway, so now that is how we do it that's what we use a lot of these kind of land-based LiDAR captures for. And a lot of these will capture images as well. So they'll color the pixels and so on and so forth. Then what a lot of people talk about are we talked a little bit about, in Cambodia, there was this is where things kind of exploded. And there was a Smithsonian special, which I would highly recommend watching, if you're able to get, find the Smithsonian. And so here's, let me see if I can pop this up real quick here. So what happened is that they started doing these scans from the they started doing scans from helicopters, typically, or planes. And what you're seeing here is this is all under jungle footage. This is all under jungle canopy. So they're shooting those, and they suddenly realized that there was what they thought was jungle, and things that just barely looked like anything had structure. They were like, oh, this is way bigger than we thought it was. This is Anchor Watt, right? But they suddenly realized that all this stuff is happening around it that they just didn't know was there, because the LiDAR is able to penetrate, again, distinguish between what it sees. Now, this is much lower resolution than what I'm talking about, but it was, eye-opening to understand that there was all of this extra, data there that they just didn't, and again, it didn't look like anything, particularly special when they, when you look at it from overhead. Let me grab this here and see if I can. So when you look at one of these temples, this is what, from the aircraft version, you can see nothing special, right? Like that's what you see when you shoot it from an aerial picture. The LiDAR suddenly showed structure. It showed irrigation. It showed, former things that had been built there. And so that's why a lot of people are really excited about aircraft-based LiDAR, is because you're able to see right through all of this and actually see what was going on almost 1,000 years ago, that's there. And so a lot of people have gotten pretty excited. They've also made, of course, discoveries with that same aircraft-based LiDAR in Honduras and Guatemala, when they're talking about, in in Mexico, I'm talking about Maya or Inca. There's suddenly these huge areas that they're suddenly able to see that they weren't able to discover. And if you get a chance, again, I don't know where the Smithsonian channel the Smithsonian app occasionally has it available, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's worth taking a look at. But they really break down what's actually happening there, and the LiDAR was a big opening. So you have that land base that I showed you, then you have the aircraft based there, and then you have the next step is really this. Of course, there is Velodyne. Velodyne is the one that makes most of the ones that you see when you're talking about. I mean, they're not the only ones that make it, but Velodyne is the ones that make it on cars. So of course, LiDAR is being used on cars, and these are kind of the round. Let me see if I can grab this real quick here. These are kind of the round sensors that you might see on a car. Let's see if I can. Interesting. Hold on. So what you, sorry, I have a little trouble with this image. So the other way that LiDAR is being used here is if we look at this here, this is what from the car's perspective, and this is it's not totally accurate to what it does, but it gives you an idea. The car is basically going out and just scanning everything around it at a very high rate. And so it can see, it doesn't care whether it's bright or dark or anything else. The LiDAR is a laser, so it doesn't really care. So it's going out there and grabbing all of that data and distance data, and it's able to do it at a high enough rate that it can see other things moving and making calculations there. Obviously, it's not perfect because we've had some issues, some accidents, but it is it's getting much better. And a lot of these cars, Velodyne tries to sell like you can put one right over the middle, but most of the cars that you're seeing, if you see the tests, you'll see them on like 5 points, and they're merging all that data in real time to get a higher resolution and more accuracy across those and error correction. So you have car-based ones, and then of course we have the last one is really the iPhone that we're starting to see, or phone-based or mobile-based. And so the iPhone is it's a lot of good marketing for LiDAR, and it is LiDAR. It's not very high resolution. So we were talking about millions of points a second. The phone is about, I believe it's 576 points that are pointed out. It's an array, I believe, I think it's an 8x8 array that has that's diffused 3x3 or diffracted 3x3. So it ends up being about 570 some points. And so what those do is they actually can go out and measure what's in front of you and start to generate those things. And probably the best example of that, I mean, it's being used for AR by Apple, but if you want to see it actually generate something, I think it's to work here. I tested it earlier, so it should work. So the one that I use the most for this right now, and I've been testing a lot of them, but the one I keep on coming back to is is one called Polycam. And so let's see here. Pop that out. Hello. Doesn't Polycam, of course, it worked before. Sorry for it just doesn't want to rotate. So I'll do it. I guess Polycam is very specific about what it wants here. All right. So what you can see here, I cut to it. So if I move this around, you'll see it to start. It's going to start. I'll hit record here. So now you see it's starting to build a model of my space, and so it's pulling that out. Now again, it doesn't do great with lower resolution, in my opinion. But what it's doing here is it's capturing that data. It'll capture my hand now. I've now ruined everything. But it'll capture that data. But it's pushing all these little points. So it's just measuring little points all over here, and then it's figuring out how to build geometry, inside of that. And so it will produce some relatively good models. Let me see if I can find you. It doesn't produce nearly the resolution of what we've been talking about. But for instance, we had this good example here is we had a DJ stand that we were doing some tests with, and we needed to just throw something into Unreal. And this is this is what we had kind of set up. We needed some speakers, and we were only going to see we were only going to see the top part here. So we didn't really care about what was down here. But what we did is I literally just walked around this and grabbed it. And then we exported it out, and to scale, it just drops right into Unreal. So you can, with some of this stuff, if you kind of are patient, and this took a minute, for me to grab onto this. So the ability to get this kind of, data is pretty slick. This is, let's see if I can, there's a bar called Sweetwater in Mill Valley, and I was meeting with the illegals, and we've all seen them play, and they were getting set up here. And so before we could meet, I just wandered around the bar and, and just grabbed, and again, you'll see that it's not the perfect data, but I can actually, this is just with my phone with no extra cost. And I was able to grab it to a point where I can measure stuff. I can just say, I want to, if I want to measure there, see if I could grab a ruler and say, I want to measure here to here. That tells me that is 4. I mean, I might have to do it again. I'm trying to do it while I'm talking, but 4 foot, it's probably 5 foot there across there, 4 foot, 11 inches. And I think I can grab that and then tap on that. And again, I'm trying to do this while I'm talking. But one part is your finger gets in the way when you're trying to do it. So that's the challenge there. But I can start making those corrections, so I can know, I can pull cases through here, or I can, how high is this, and it is capturing that data. And because it's structured light, it is actually the distance, within a pretty reasonable amount. Now, resolution isn't nearly as high. I can't build models from that in the same way that I could from the LiDAR. But it is something that you can grab, and I would highly recommend. I do it at least with my phone for almost every place that I do an event. I just walk around with the phone and paint it. There is some limits.
Sorry to interrupt you, Alex, but is that scan there one where you physically handheld and rotated that last Polycam?
Yeah. I didn't just I walked all over the place. It keeps track of it all. Yeah. So it's. I'll show it to you again.
Because what you're going to be excited about, because I know you bought this, because I just bought it too, which is that $79 Matterport. It does those turns for you automatically. So you can just say, go ahead and do your thing and walk out of the room, and it'll just do in steps automatically for $79. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's still sitting in a box. I've been trying to keep myself. I have a deadline that I'm working on that's keeping me from allowing myself to open it, because if I open it, I'll lose a week. Anyway. So, but yeah, what's nice about this is just in my pocket. I don't have to put any tripods up. I don't get any information. I literally just walk around I literally walked around. I don't think anybody had any idea what I was doing while I was scanning this. There was no setup or anything else, and it tracked it pretty well. It'll use both the LiDAR that it has there, as well as accelerometers and everything else to keep track of it. It can drift a little bit. And again, I've used the bigger Matterport, and that's a much better solution. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that I'm excited about that little Matterport. And the Matterport that Guy's talking about is really cool, because not only does it do a LiDAR and grab that, it knows where it is. I'm wandering around in that one, and all I have is one big model. The Matterport will build a tour, so I can say, oh, I want to click and go over here. I want to click and go over. It'll build a map and a tour, and all the other things there. And we used Matterports for surveying for a long time. They just became big and clunky in there. It's hard to ship them, and so this little one makes a big difference. But and Guy, you're able to jump. You have like a map that you can jump from.
Yeah, so it does create the map. So this is just my house, first scan I ever did with my phone. And it'll ask you in the options, do you want to do a 3D scan or a LiDAR complete scan? And again, this is $79. So the money's in your phone, but if you already own the phone, and you're only allowed 2 free scans. This is where they get you. If you want to
I
host
paid for
more
the whole
than
thing. So I paid like $100. I paid $200 or something for it. So I have the year membership which I haven't used yet. I'm burning up, so I got to go.
Yeah, and then on the iPad app, you can do all the measurements and things like that. But I was super impressed with how this came out. I'm excited to do some of these other scans, because in Google, you can actually tell it, if you did the paid plan, you can walk around and do businesses and scan them and upload them to Google Business. So it's pretty cool stuff. And you can do floors, like you can tell if this is floor 1, add a floor and scan floor 2, and you just walk around and it just does it for you.
Yeah, cool absolutely. Stuff. And it's good business. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time. I think I got the one that I had in 2017 or whatever. And I had the full on one. And I think the phone is, the stuff I've seen from the phone looks like it's the same quality as the one that was $5,000, that I paid $5,000 and a subscription to use. So I think that they haven't lost any quality there, and being able to get that data quick and easy and being able to do that is super valuable, and it just lets you pre-viz, when you're trying to load in somewhere, at least having Polycam, maybe having the Matterport, and then possibly having a bigger scanner means that you can, when you're talking to teams and figuring these things out, you can really accurately figure out how are you going to actually, produce something. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I was wondering, I had a question about LiDAR on cars. And the thing that worries me is they always show these self-driving cars, like we were looking at earlier, like the Waymo. It has the scanner on top there. And they show it how it maps its surrounding in real time as it's driving around, and it tells the difference between pedestrians and other cars. Now, what happens when you get into a situation where every car has LiDAR on it? How does it distinguish the difference between its reflected LiDAR signal and the live signal that's coming from other cars? Is each signal encoded with a unique serial number, so it's a pulse-coded
I think I actually, it's a good question. I think that it's expecting to get that it's expecting to get the return at nearly the identical angle, or at the identical angle that it sent it. So you could have other things doing what they're doing, but if they're coming at a different angle than what it's sent out as, it's not going to read that. Doesn't mean that there's a car
coming toward you that has LiDAR on it.
I know, but it has to be its LiDAR has to hit exactly at the angle of incidence that the LiDAR that's being sent out is, because it's going to go, they're back. And so it's not looking at everything around it. So if something's coming towards it, there's a chance, but it would be one ray out of, the car's driving past you. It would be like one ray of errata or 10 rays of errata, but it's taking millions of samples, and it's definitely going to get, because of reflections, because of absorption, because of everything else, it's already losing it's losing thousands of points all the time. And it's gathered, so it's going out and getting millions of points, coming back with, thousands of points less. Other LiDAR would probably not significantly increase the error, in my opinion.
I would think if there's, 30 cars in a 100-foot radius, all spewing LiDAR 360 degrees.
Each one of them,
reflections.
Each one of them is
reflections would be so.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we don't know because we haven't seen it, but I think
that they tested this in a situation where there are 30 cars all being self-driven within a 4-block area.
I'm going to guess it's another second hour. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. But I do think that it would probably not significantly increase it just because of the amount of data that it's grabbing and the fact that it has to be perfect angle of incidence. I mean, mathematically perfect. It's like shooting a bullet with a bullet. Like it would be, it just wouldn't happen very often. I mean, you can do it, but it's hard. Next question.
Next question, actually, the first one we dealt with here, Sky Gleason says, I've seen LiDAR scans used for site surveys, then put into Blender to build a virtual set for pre-viz. What other uses is LiDAR helpful for?
And this question was 30 minutes ago. So
no, it's all good. It's all good.
But we've answered a lot of it.
Alex,
some of it.
Alex, we use LiDAR when we did the pumpkins. I did exactly what Alex just showed. And I scanned in the room, and then we had all the dimensions and sent it to the guys, and we knew everything. It was basically a pre-viz, so it worked out great. It's a good parlor trick too, because most people don't know that LiDAR is even on their phone. If they have a 12 Pro or 13, they don't even know what that sensor is on the back.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be great for AR and VR. It is great for pre-viz. It is also, again, one of the things that we're really excited about, and I think we've only seen the very beginning of this, is the mixture of LiDAR and photogrammetry. So because an iPhone 12 and 13 Pros have LiDAR and they have cameras, and most importantly, those cameras are known. So those are fixed cameras that we know a lot about. It means that the photogrammetry works really well, but it doesn't know what the scale is. The LiDAR is able to inform it of the scale, and so you're starting to see the object capture technology that Apple's doing is on the way to mixing the LiDAR with the photogrammetry, so you get super accurate models that are very highly detailed. And one of the things that you'll see there is also the other app that I'm super excited about that you can't get, that most people can't get right now, is Reality Scan. Reality Scan is from Epic. It's taking the Reality Capture, which is a software that Epic bought, and they made Reality Scan free. You want to put yourself on the list, because I pay a lot of attention to this. The moment the page opened, I jumped on the list, and there were the first 10,000 people got in, and so I've been playing with it, and it's really really accurate. And so, but it's using a mixture of the LiDAR and the photogrammetry, which is what Reality Capture was good at. I think that there is a lot of untapped potential. Like, for instance, one of the things that is going to happen, if I wasn't so busy doing virtual events during COVID, this is all I would have done, is gone to facilities and scanned the facilities to build AR, future AR solutions. So the big thing is that if you want things to roll down the walls or hang from things or do all kinds of cool things, you need all that data. You need to know where all that data is. And to get all that data, you need to scan it. And so you think about every arena, every convention center, anything that's got events wants to be scanned, so that you have that data, so that you can create AR experiences inside of those. And I think there's a huge opportunity in that area to just go around scanning things. And the worst part was I looked at it over and over and over again. I was just too busy doing what I was doing. But I looked at it like, oh my gosh, all these spaces are empty. It would cost me nothing. All I needed was a scanner to wander around and scan stuff. So.
But you don't even have to do it anymore. There's this little robotic dog that'll walk around from like a little cruise around and do
the
it
hardest
all
part was
for you.
access. The scanning access was the thing, right? This is the BLK. It sits on top of a Boston Dynamics dog. Yeah. And so this is a good example of another thing to point out to what Sky was talking to here is this dog. It really is a dog, and not a dog, it's a mechanical dog. So they use these in construction sites. I've actually talked to someone who's using these in construction sites, and what they do is these dogs, every night when they shut down, they only have security left at the construction site. They send the dog in. The dog scans everything, and what it does is it gives them an as-built, so they know exactly where they are in the construction process. And so every night they scan the entire site. Or the sites the parts that they're interested in. And that dog just walks around and grabs all that data every night and then and literally you can take this data that you're seeing from the dog. If you take something like the Microsoft HoloLens, Microsoft's gone really towards architecture, engineering, construction, so AAC, and you can walk into your construction site from anywhere in the world and look around and see how it's doing. And you can say, show me the CAD drawing underneath the scan to make sure that it's accurate to what you're trying to do. And so, a lot of the LiDAR stuff is being heavily used in these other areas. Another place that LiDAR is used is, and Fred will probably bring this up when we bring him on, they had to build new support structures inside of the Cal Berkeley Stadium, but they were, it's brick, and every entrance is different. And so what they did is they scanned every entrance and they handed that data back so they could custom build the metal bars that would go through it, that would fit exactly. So every entrance had its own custom space, And then if you look at it like my TJ Asher, I don't quite understand what part of this company he's part of, but they make boots, really, really nice boots. He showed some on Discord, and I told my daughter about them, my older daughter, and she's really into, she's a lot of medieval type, LARPing and so on and so forth. And so she, I said, look at these boots. And she goes, I'm at Pensick, which is like a big medieval recreation thing. And so anyway, I said, well, go there and get measured. Well, to measure her feet, to put these boots on, they have to use all this tape and stuff all over it to figure out, because they're molding it to her foot. And they're going to build them. It takes them a year, evidently. So for us to get the boot, I was like, oh, they should be using LiDAR for that. Like, this is where you just scan someone's foot, and then you'd have the data. And
as that dog was roaming around, I was imagining you could do a difference map and then use AI to prove this is what was done from day to day to day.
Yeah.
So you could see incremental changes.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then you have drone-based scans. And so you can take that Velodyne style LiDAR and fly it over the drone. Now, it has to do a lot of error correction to make that happen. But if you look at the industrial drones that DJI makes, they have LiDAR is one of the options that you can put in there, and they scan it over. It's not as accurate, but it does do the error correction for the movement, and it also can do feature matching to make that work. And so they tie a lot of those. There's a drone that so you can also do that there, and those are used again for. Those drones can be used, and the dogs and everything else can be used for gathering, all kinds of data around a construction site. Here's the funny thing about LiDAR. And then we'll jump in because I know we have a bunch of questions here. It turns out moving dirt is a big deal. I didn't know this until I hung out with Fred enough, but they scan the dirt. So they say, I have to move a certain number of tons of dirt. We have to move this much dirt from one place to another. So they scan the dirt, and they know roughly how heavy it is by area. And so what they do is they scan the dirt, and then they move a bunch of dirt out, and they scan it again, and they make a calculation on how much dirt was moved. And so moving dirt turns out to be another thing. And then the other thing that they get into is they'll scan the space, and a lot of the when they're grading the space and trying to make it perfectly accurate, they have a model of what it is now. They have a model of where it's trying to go, and the graders are automated to allow them to cut that perfectly. And so it's a really, we're just at the very beginning of this, but we're going to keep talking about photogrammetry and LiDAR, because if you're a media professional, there are lots of things you can add to what you're doing now. But this is going to become more and more important as we go forward of the kinds of things you can add, because again, a good example that I was doing demos, I had someone scan the space that I was in. We converted it to USDZ. So they made a lower res version in USDZ. I put it into Motion, and I built all my demos on it, in Motion, just moving things around and capturing images. I wasn't even doing anything else, and that's from the scan. So there's a lot of things you can do with it. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Guy Cochran, and he asks, is the $79 Matterport using LiDAR?
And then we discussed that a little bit, but yeah, it is definitely using the LiDAR from the phone.
And it does show like a more, compared to the older one, it does say that the regular 3D scan, so if you don't have LiDAR in your phone, it'll just capture and estimate step data, whereas the proper LiDAR is like dimensionally accurate, perfect to a T, down to, whatever the smallest increment it does. It's pretty dang accurate, though.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really exciting product. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee. Can LiDAR and photogrammetry be used together on iPhone to create a digital twin of an object?
Yeah, and that's really what, if you look at object capture, the object capture program that Apple's putting together and a lot of their examples that are driving a bunch of different pieces of software that are out there, you're going to see Apple continue to turn that volume up as they get ready for AR and VR and everything else there. But object capture is what you're looking at, and that is, it does have the ability to mix and match your LiDAR and photogrammetry. Again, the photogrammetry is going to give you way more detail, but what the LiDAR allows you to do is know the scale near perfect, as well as edge detection. So one of the things with photogrammetry is it just has an image. It doesn't know what is in the foreground and what's in the background. The LiDAR can tell it, this stuff's in the foreground, this stuff's in the background, and inform it. Makes it much easier for the photogrammetry to do its job. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael again. What specific use cases do we see LiDAR used for in production?
And we talked about it a little bit, but where we see it a lot is pre-viz. Pre-viz is, so there's, there's a couple things. One is pre-viz, where in many production companies are going to send out LiDAR to, like, you have a couple buildings, for Spider-Man or whatever, or for, and there's an area there. You want to grab that data so that you can figure out where the truss work's going to go and where the trucks are going to go and how you're going to set this up. And all of that stuff is all pre-vized to make that happen. You're also going to use it in post-production. A lot of times, again, you scan the sets. You scan the sets because what if I have to rebuild that set? A lot of these sets, if you're watching something, a lot of that's four-walled into there's a big studio and they built up, they just dropped walls that are made out of, whatever, usually, and they make it look like a set, but how do you remember what it looked like? Now you can take lots of photos, but the scan makes it a lot easier to figure out where everything exactly was so that you can come back and do it again. Also, it'll capture all the lighting and all the other pieces for the shot. So if you ever need to redo something or add something to it, you have all that data later. And then finally, you use it in production where if you want something to interact with that wall, having that scan means that you can grab onto it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, for set extensions, for computer graphics, and or for construction, if they have to say, oh, well, we need another 5 feet on the top of that building and that wall and that's halfway down the block there because it needs to block something, then they know how much material to buy and how much it's going to take to construct that physical wall. And then visual effects can use it for creating set extensions, although these days they pretty much use just tracking software. Does most of the job for them.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
My exposure was through Mountain View Staging, which is acquaintance of yours, Alex.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they put it in a big downtown office building right there in San Francisco because we had to go on site to create a set inside of their office space. And consequently, this allowed us to not just determine what equipment would work best and what angles and perspectives, where to hang lights and how to do that, but it also automatically was allowing the client to, because they took it into Blender, give them options of the decorations and make creative choices before you get in there when you don't have the time or the money, and make a lot of creative choices ahead of time. So the previs of it all being virtual before you ever, have to start buying things.
Yeah, it really helps. A lot of people can't make decisions until they see it. They're like, I'll know it when I see it. And
especially executives, which this is not their world.
I mean, I need to see things sometimes like, oh, this is a little too close or this is too far away. And we've definitely found that if you scan a lot of this stuff and then build those models out, I can put something on and then, we've been playing with it in VR. You can put it in Unreal or on Unity and then put it into VR. And now you're able to walk around in it or look around in it at least. And you're able to, and I believe there is a VR version of what Matterport does where you can actually put it on. There was some partnership at some point. I don't know where that went. But anyway, but you can visualize these things and jump from place to place and really get a sense of it. But we've had clients make massive decisions about what we were going to do based on the visualization of it that otherwise would have been made on set when we already have, tape down. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, we did this on Poseidon Adventure, the remake, the Bosler remake of it. They VizRT, I was working with VizRT, and they did pre-viz set extensions. So, because on stage, they had all these sets that were upside down and were going to be flooded with water later, but they're only part of the set, and they're camera shots that started low and then tilted up to a set that's not really there. It's just lights above it. And so VizRT had tracking sensors in all the cameras and all the Luma cranes. And so that they could pump in this 3D set extensions. And on the monitor, the director can see when that camera tilts up, he'll see what the visual effects is eventually going to look like. And it's tied to the camera move, so that once it's mapped and sunk up, it's like it's the same company that does the the lines on the field in the football games and the ads that are stuck to the game. So it looks like it's actually there and stuck to it. So it's a good pre-visualization in production. So it lets you know, and the cameraman know how far he can tilt up or what he's going to be seeing if he pans to the right and so on, when there's not something there and when you're actually shooting it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's good for also is if you have kind of the AR or overlay graphics that you see in broadcast, sometimes you're doing it into a stadium or sometimes you're doing it into a location, and you want that to snap right in. Now, you have the tracking data for it, but it's a lot easier if you have the 3D data to just put that where it needs to be in the stadium and then track it in. And if it's not fitting, it's not. There's something wrong with the optics, not wrong with the model. Next question.
Next one comes from Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee, and he says, recommended low-budget LiDAR gear or apps?
I still lean towards Polycam as far as the lowest app. It's a couple bucks. I mean, it's like $7 or $8 a month. So it is something that it does cost you money, and I use it often enough to make it worth it. Just barely, but I do. And then I think that what Guy showed with Matterport is probably the next step up. So there's kind of Polycam and then Matterport, and then after that, you're really, you're going into real gear. So at that point, the next step up for the BLK360 that I showed there is about $18,000 or $20,000. So there's not a lot. There's not a lot in between. So I'm buying the BLK from a friend who is giving me a good deal. so I'm not paying the $18,000 for it, but he just isn't using it enough. So anyway, for what he changed to what he does, and so he doesn't need it, and he has access to other ones and all that fun stuff. But I could never afford the $18,000 even. So I've been kind of getting really good with the phone. Once I get the BLK360, which I'll be next week, we'll do another one of these in a month or so, and we'll actually turn it on and we'll give you some data to play with, and you can download some E57s and everything else. That's why I wanted to get it. I wanted to get it so that I can start giving you real world captures and let you learn how to do it, because it is what we're not going to get into today. This is just the intro. Processing the data becomes another thing. You get these raw files, you get E57 files that you have to then what are you going to convert them into, and then how do you turn them into models, and then how do you there's a whole bunch of bits and pieces that we aren't covering today that we will cover in the future once we have a tool that will capture it for us. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego, when photographing outdoors, does LiDAR provide accurate information when it starts to rain?
I don't know, because when it starts to rain, you pull your LiDAR equipment out of the rain as fast as possible because it's really expensive. I will tell you most likely, no, it won't, because it's going to affect the optics. The rain is going to distort the optics, and that is going to cause it to not come back. So rain is probably not something you can shoot in, nor would be underwater. Although I saw something while I was researching for today that showed someone doing LiDAR underwater. I don't even know how that would work. But anyway, that's and then there's also handheld LiDAR scanners as well, or laser scanners that you can use that are similar. Next question.
Jesse Mills in the San Francisco Bay Area. Can we see some examples of scans that Alex has made?
So next time, I'll show it to you. I pulled up all my scans, and then I realized all of them are, I actually have one sitting here, but I realized they're all stuff I can't show. So anyway, I just need to dig deeper into it. I have to admit that I was getting this ready this morning, and I thought I had this folder of scans, and I was like, oh, I'll be able to grab one of those scans and show it. And then I looked at it again, and I was like, I better not on YouTube. So, but I will, the next time we talk about this I will be shooting stuff that specifically we can open up and take a look at. But sorry about that. I did intend to show you some of my scans. I just don't have any on my computer that are able to be shown. Next question.
Mark Giuliani in Washington, D.C. How high in feet can a ceiling be while still providing detail when using an iPhone 12 Pro as the LiDAR device? We find it about 20 to 25 feet. I think technically it says 30 feet, but I find that it's not particularly useful after about 20 to 20, somewhere between 20 and 25 feet, it stops being useful. So that tends to be the range, and that's generally the range for the LiDAR on the phone. So that's why you have to kind of walk around. I'll go, Sky.
I did the inside of a sanctuary of a large church. And again, what I was thinking, it was the lighting issue, but to your point, it's laser, so it doesn't care the lights are on or not. So But it does, when it's capturing the reflective skin that is going to go onto it, that I had the lights on, it worked great.
Yeah. Next question.
Rob Collins of Kansas City, Missouri says, how much and how good a scan would be possible using the LiDAR scanner on a Boston Dynamics spot and having it walk around to scout out a location? Thoughts?
I've seen some, just what they've shown in their PR materials, and it actually looks reasonably good. It's not going to be something that you can build a photoreal model from, but does it track all that information relatively accurately? Absolutely. So I think it solves the problem with all these things, especially with LiDAR. You have to look at what problem you're trying to solve, because it is, you can get really expensive and really time consuming very quickly. I mean, the starts at the phone, then the next step up is the BL, or the Matterport, still has a phone in it. Then the next step up is the BLK, which is 18,000. But the one that we use for really high resolution is the ZNF. And that one's like 80,000 for that. And kind of between that is the Faro. And the Faro 350, I think, is about $45,000. And that's oftentimes the one. And it's nice because the ZNF is a checked bag and the Faro is in your backpack. So it's it's a little bit smaller. The BLK 360, one of the big advantages is you can really throw it in your backpack with your laptop and everything else and capture stuff. So we'll be capturing a bunch of things once it shows up. Next question.
John Prado on the panel from Las Vegas says, Elon Musk says anyone relying on LiDAR is doomed. He had a doomed. Thoughts?
Go ahead, John.
This is Elon being Elon. And they don't use LiDAR in their cars, although I'm told that they're testing out new LiDAR systems.
Yeah.
But they have, to Cordy's point earlier, they have a combination of ultrasonics, LiDAR, and cameras. And then they mix all three of those together to make decisions on the self-driving cars. I watch this market very closely. And so we're at level 2 right now. Level 5 is fully automated, but I think we're still a decade away.
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Go, Courtney.
Yeah, we're seeing ads here in LA right now against Elon Musk's self-driving Teslas, saying that they're dangerous, and it shows the car running over little child dummies in full self-driving mode, just using the cameras and no LiDAR.
Right.
So there's a public campaign that's going on against Tesla's self-driving. So
yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so one of the biggest tests they did of self-driving was in Arizona, where I used to live actually in Tempe, which is one of the suburbs of Phoenix. And I was really familiar with the intersection where the one fatality they've had with a self-driving car happened. It was down on 5th and Mill, actually a little south of about 3rd Street and Mill. And that is a nightmare. It's always been a nightmare. There's a landscape medium in the way. And I understand that the woman, a homeless woman who had stepped out of there, literally stepped into directly the path of this vehicle, to the point where even if a really aware driver had hit the brakes at the same time, there's a highly likelihood that she still would have been hit. It was just the biggest edge case. Now, that's blown up into a bunch of stuff, but I don't think you can take that one thing as gospel. It was an unusual circumstance.
Yeah, and that's probably a whole nother second hour is how it works with cars. But the key is getting in my opinion, the machines and the people not interacting with each other. I just think you just get the cars. Let the cars are really good in the highway, and then let them do that. And I think that what we will probably see is, my guess is going to be, I'm going to make the bold prediction that by 2035, there'll be roads that you're not allowed to drive in. That's the big thing, is that they're going to move to, if you went on this highway, it has to be a thing that will take away your controls and let the computer run it, because the cars will be going too fast and too close to each other for a human to interact with. Next question is from Mark Breslow. And Mark says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped right in. I was on a Sunday mode. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
It's okay.
Bill.
Go ahead and finish it up.
I don't know why I was thinking about a rush, and I went into Sunday mode really quickly.
I've done the same thing when Mitch is doing it. You just get
Does LiDAR create a colorless point cloud or 3D model? Do you have to apply graphic skins or color to the captured object afterwards? So the LiDAR can capture. It'll capture images. It'll also it'll color the vertices that it grabs onto. So it can give you a colored map. It's not the textures, but it can help derive those textures. And sometimes you can use the photos with the geometry to create textures from it. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Bray, California says, what gear or storage do you need behind an 18,000K sensor?
It's actually comes in a little plastic case that keeps it protected, and you get some batteries with it. The biggest pain, the bokkeh360, I'm buying it because I can afford it, but I know it well enough to know that there's no physical connection to the bokkeh360, which means you have to use Wi-Fi to pull each scan off onto an iPad, and it is super painful. So that's the downside of it. But from a cost perspective, especially what I'm buying it for, I can't compete with it, and I know what the pain looks like, so I'm gonna do it. So next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. The Matterport El Cheapo plan gives you 5 scans. You can store unlimited scans as an offline archive. Can you store unlimited scans? What's the workaround?
Good guy.
Yeah, it seems like you can store an unlimited amount offline and then take them back online if you want to measure anything or bring it back up so people can embed it in a web page or something like that. And so that's the way they get you, is they want you to graduate to the next plan up. So it just depends on your use case and what you want to do.
Absolutely. Next question.
Paul Wallace again. Outdoor scans with the little Matterport. Will that work? And if so, how well?
It should. I know that the older Matterport did not work outside very well at all. So I don't know whether this one's any better. I know that the older Matterport did not like outside, and that, in fact, Matterport built a partnership with Leica to use the bokkeh360 as the kind of the outdoor version of what it was doing for people who needed that. But it may have gotten better. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Can you just do your scans at night?
You can. You won't get the color data, but the scans they will work, or they should work. But I haven't tested it. Last question for the hour.
Douglas Carmichael, could LiDAR be used for an app to plan and or map outdoor travel?
Yeah. I mean, well, especially when you think about, I think that the project that I'm working on in Anchor Water, that I'm fiddling with in Anchor Water, I don't know if I'll ever finish it, is the idea that you could really tour Anchor Water completely, or many other historical sites, before you get there, and because that would save you a lot of time. once you've been able to roam around and get the information and get your wits about you and what it looks like, I think that's a building AR interactive experiences based on location is at least a $10 billion industry in the next decade. It's a huge market that is barely been touched, and that's why I've been fiddling with it for a couple decades. Anyway, so it's but the technology is almost caught up with us, so we're almost there. If you look back, I was doing 360s in Zimbabwe, 20 years ago. So thinking about how we would do this, and that's one of the things I want to do is take a scanner down and scan Great Zimbabwe. Anyway, we'll see. All right, there we go. Thank you to our producers. A lot of great questions. I wasn't sure if we'd get a lot of questions, but we did, and they were good questions. So really well done. And we'll talk about this more. Hopefully, we'll keep everybody excited about it. Maybe we'll even bring Matterport on and have them discuss it and show it to us. I think we can do that. But great questions, and thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. It's a great discussion today. And then finally, thanks to the great crew, 7 days a week, putting this together, making it great. So really appreciate all your work. All right, now we're going to jump into After Hours. And remember that we got Ken. So jump right in here. Ken's going to show you some cool stuff. And then at 10, right, Guy? 10, we're doing
10
SRT.
SRT.
9 o'clock is Ken.
AWS servers are fired up and raring to go.
Woo-hoo.
We're waiting for your ingest.
Excellent. So it's a busy morning if you have the time to play. All right.
Tony in the evening.
And Tony is at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So it's becoming busy days. Eventually, this is going to be 24/7, but we're slowly just edging our way towards it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. I now need to start having a script for what's happening after office hours. Everybody's in together.
If it's Tuesday, it must be Paris.
Truth star, as opposed to LiDAR. Truth star, pointing to you, liar.
I'm aware because I'm talking to Tony tonight.
Oh, you're on it.
Yeah. Get my shot.
Oh. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I need to get those updates. I should put those updates into the email, but